Yes, all the points that you touched on, like I definitely resonate. So I'm gonna go back on some of your points and then circle back up. So when you were talking about how for you, like you thought everyone was in foster care, you thought everyone had a social worker. I was a little bit of the opposite. I like completely did not want anybody to know that I was a foster kid because of the stereotype. Like when I used to think of foster care in general, I'm like, oh my God, no, they're the bad guys. They're the bad guys. So there were so many times where someone should have probably called CPS, but because I also live in a culture, in a community where it's like, you don't talk about what's happening at home. Like what happens at home, it stays at home. And it's like, to what point do we speak up and say something? And for me, it was, I vividly remember it stuff just had got so bad to the point where it was like, it's gonna be my life, my siblings' lives, or we're gonna find safety. So I actually ended up making the call to CPS when I was 10 years old. And I called them and I said, listen, we can't go back there, he's gonna kill us. And from that moment on, I didn't know what was gonna happen. I didn't know what life would look like, but I just knew that I had to say something because I was afraid for my life. I was afraid for my siblings' life. So when we entered foster care, it was so taboo. Like I remember being in 7th grade and some of my friends at my new school were like, hey, we're gonna go to the library, we're gonna hang out. And I didn't know how to tell them that I couldn't hang out with them because I had to meet with my social worker. And immediately after that, I had to go see a therapist. And immediately after that, I then had to meet with a life coach. Because then there's a series of different meetings and doctor's appointments that you have to go to. And it would always just be like, oh no, my grandma said I couldn't go. And it was like this thing where I didn't want people to come over to my house, or I didn't want people to ask too many questions, because how do I tell you that, yeah, so basically I'm a ward of the state and I can't do all the things that you guys do because there's also no sense of normalcy. So how people can just go out of state with their friends or sleep over their friend's house, in New Jersey, you have to get all of that stuff approved by a judge. Nobody wants to go tell their law guardian or their social worker, hey, I want to sleep over Sarah's house next weekend, can I go? But if I sleep over Sarah's house, they have to interview Sarah's parents. They have to go look at the home. Like, nobody wants to do that. So at that point, I was like, okay, you know what? My sleepovers is going to be with my siblings, and that's it. So there was a lot of trying to, like, adjust to that type of lifestyle. But I would say, like, finally, when we were able to be placed with our grandmother, and you talked about safety a little bit, and I always laugh because at the age of 11, I knew what an egress window was because of all the safety requirements that they have in the home, right? So they weren't trying to approve my grandmother to basically become our foster mom and take all 5 of us in, but she was the only person that was willing to take all 5 kids in. No other foster home wanted all of us. My brother was older, he was a teenager, so they were like independent living or group home. My siblings and I were like back to back to back. Some places are like, we'll take 2, we'll take 3. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere without all 5 of us being together. So we need to go with my grandmother. So I just remember them coming in and it was always like, oh, you have to have an egress window and all these different types of stuff. And I just sort of like, do regular people have to have an egress window in order to take their kids home from the hospital? Like, I just thought that was so absurd, and the focus is so much on safety that sometimes they lose the point of, if there's a home, right, and there's no safety concerns, there's accessibility, there's, you know, access to different resources and stuff, why are we making this 10 times harder? Fast forward, we ended up getting all the safety stuff figured out about 3 years later, but my grandmother then became our constant. But it wasn't until, you know, a couple years later that she no longer had the ability to care for us the way that she originally did. So I ended up going back into the system and aging out of the system. But that idea of normalcy and like safety is definitely something that I resonate with.